Okay, so welcome back to another deep dive.
Yeah.
And as always, we're here to help you guys really get a clearer picture of whatever you're working on.
Yeah, absolutely.
So whether it's articles you're reading for class or for work, maybe some research you're doing for a project, or even like drafts of your own writing,
Oh, yeah.
we're here to help.
We're here to help you boost your understanding, one conversation at a time.
Exactly.
One deep dive at a time.
One deep dive at a time.
Yeah, and today,
That's a day.
we are focusing on helping one of our listeners,
Yeah.
Suenia. She's got the TOEFL exam coming up
Oh, wow.
in just a week,
Okay.
and she's looking to strengthen her writing skills.
Yeah, so the TOEFL, for those of you who are familiar with it, the writing section is so important.
Crucial.
Crucial.
Yeah.
It's not just about having good ideas.
Right.
It's about, how do you present those ideas in a really clear and structured way?
In a well-structured essay.
Yeah.
With good grammar.
With good grammar.
All in response to a very specific question, right?
Right, and that's what they're really testing.
Yeah.
Like, can you communicate effectively in English?
Exactly.
With all of the,
The nuances.
The nuances, yeah.
Yeah.
So Suenia tackled a really comprehensive TOEFL-style prompt.
Yeah, this one was a tough one.
It was a tough one, so...
It asked her to explore the experiences of women in Brazil in the 2020s.
Oh, wow.
Considering how gender roles are changing.
Okay.
What challenges persist. The influence of feminist movements and social advocacy.
Okay.
The impact of political changes, economic disparities and cultural expectations.
Wow, that's a lot.
A lot to consider.
A lot to consider in one essay.
Yeah, and then on top of that,
Oh, no.
she had to connect the Brazilian context to broader global movements for gender equality.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
So a lot.
That's a lot.
I think about.
So to get a sense of kind of where Suenia is in her writing journey.
We're going to start by looking at her initial response to this multifaceted question.
Yes.
And then we're going to examine a revised version that includes feedback from her teacher, Paulo.
Wonderful Paulo.
Wonderful Paulo.
He gives great feedback.
He does give great feedback.
Always very encouraging.
Always very encouraging. So let's start with that first take that she had on what it means to be a woman in Brazil in the 2020s.
All right, let's hear it.
Okay, so she wrote, "Being a woman in Brazil is really hard. If you have chosen a difficult area, such as math, you will suffer prejudice if you are married. It is good, but if you are divorced, it is hard, especially if you have children and you have to interact with other parents, especially women."
So, you can really hear her, some of the real challenges that she's perceiving,
Yeah.
right? The sentiment is there.
Yeah.
But, for a formal TOEFL essay, you really need something a little more developed,
Yeah.
a little more structured.
Right.
Yeah.
That addresses all those different angles of the
Yes.
prompt in detail. But, it's a starting point.
It is.
And you can kind of get a sense of her immediate thoughts on this.
Yeah.
So now let's look at that second draft.
Okay.
Now, this is after she's had some classroom instruction and some initial feedback from Paulo.
Okay.
So we're going to go through it kind of paragraph by paragraph, and we'll look at some of the specific corrections that he made.
Okay.
And also some broader enhancement insights that he has.
Yeah, I love that he calls them enhancement insights.
Yeah, it's really...
It's positive.
It's positive. Yeah, it's not just like you did this wrong.
Right.
It's like, how can we make this even better?
Exactly.
So, Suenia, this is a great opportunity, I think, for you to see how this kind of targeted feedback can really help refine your writing.
Absolutely.
So let's start with the beginning.
Okay.
That second draft starts with, when it comes to the lives of women in Brazil, there is no easy answer.
Yeah.
It is a very complex issue that depends on many aspects to be fully understood.
So much stronger.
Right.
That is a great opening.
It is a great opening.
It sets that academic tone right away.
Right.
Acknowledges the complexity.
Yes.
And that's what they're looking for in the TOEFL.
Exactly. Exactly. So within this first paragraph, Paulo made a couple of little grammatical tweaks.
Okay.
So Suenia's original phrasing was, when it comes of life of women in Brazil.
Oh.
Yeah. And Paulo changed that to when it comes to the lives of women in Brazil.
Right.
So it's a small change.
Yeah.
But it makes a big difference.
Huge difference.
It's just one preposition, but it really tightens it up.
Yeah, and prepositions, are really difficult for English language learners.
Yeah.
But, when you can get them right, it really adds that level of precision.
Precision.
Yes, to your writing.
Okay, so a little later in that same paragraph, she wrote, "It is very complex issues."
Issues with an S.
With an S.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Paulo correctly identified that little mismatch there.
Yeah.
And he changed it to singular.
Right.
It is a very complex issue.
Subject-verb agreement.
Yeah.
Gotta get it.
Gotta get it.
It's a fundamental point.
It is fundamental, and then the sentence continues. Brazil is a huge country with a multiple social, cultural, and economic context that determines how women has access to their rights. So Paulo made two really important corrections here.
Okay.
So first of all, he removed that unnecessary article, a before multiple.
Got it.
And second of all, he changed context to the plural contexts.
Right.
To match social, cultural, and economic.
So that agreement?
Yeah. So that improved version reads, Brazil is a huge country with multiple social, cultural, and economic contexts that determine how women have access to their rights.
So much clearer and more accurate.
Much clearer.
Yeah.
And you'll notice also in that corrected sentence that he addressed the verb conjugation as well.
Oh, yes.
So Suenia had to keep to how women has access.
As.
Which should be
Okay.
have, because the subject is women.
Women.
So again, another common area, for errors, but something that you can really easily fix.
Right. And once you get it, then you're good to go.
And then the final correction in this opening paragraph is all about word choice.
Okay.
So Suenia wrote, if you live in a rural area or you are a native person, it is likely you will have far more difficult to access public services.
Difficult.
Yeah. So Paulo revised this to, if you live in a rural area or are an indigenous person, it is likely that you will have far more difficulty accessing public services.
Ah, so much better.
Right. So much smoother.
Smoother, yeah.
And also uses that correct noun form, difficulty.
Right, because difficult is the adjective describing something.
Right.
Difficulty is the noun.
The noun.
That's the state of being difficult.
It's the state of being difficult.
And that in there often helps create a clearer structure.
Structure, yeah.
And then also, native person is being replaced more and more by indigenous person.
Yes.
Which is more specific and respectful.
Okay, so let's move on now to the second paragraph.
Okay.
Where Suenia starts to bring in some of her own personal experience. So she writes, in my own experience, I had known about my rights to face many challenges when I left my parents' home to study in Kiev. I went to another state to continue my studying because where I lived, there were not universities in the late 80s in Brazil. We lived the era of democratic opening. I went to study agronomic engineering in a small town called Area in Paraíba. There were 4 women to 76 men in my university entrance class students. At 1988, most of them were sexists and, life in the college. There were not conditions to receive women. Everything was projected to receive men, such as accommodations, practices, classes, etc. Most male students did not respect their female peers.
I love this paragraph.
Yeah.
Because she's really starting to connect,
Yes.
the broader societal issues to her own life.
Yes, and Paulo highlights that as a real strength.
He does.
Later on.
Yeah.
But there are a few specific kind of grammatical and word choice things that he addresses here.
Okay.
So first of all, he looks at that verb tense, I had known about my rights.
I had known.
Yeah, and he changes that to, I became aware of my rights.
Became aware.
Yeah, so it's a really subtle difference, but it kind of suggests this process of understanding unfolding rather than just like, I knew it.
Yeah.
So it kind of emphasizes that moment of realization.
Nice.
Then she wrote, to continue my studying.
Studying.
Which Paulo changes to continue my studies.
Studies.
So studying here is acting like a noun.
Right.
It's that gerund. But studies is that more standard noun form.
Okay.
To refer to academic pursuit.
Okay.
And then similarly, later on, she talked about her university entrance class students at 1988.
1988.
And he changed that to, in my university entrance class in 1988.
Yeah.
So again, just kind of smoothing out that sentence structure.
That's better.
And the preposition.
Yeah.
And then instead of there were 4 women to 76 men.
Okay.
He wrote it out as there are 4 women and 76 men.
Right. So writing out those numbers.
Yeah, which is often preferred for formal writing, especially with smaller numbers.
Especially with smaller numbers.
And then this next correction is interesting because it addresses like both the form of a word and the clarity of meaning.
Okay, I'm interested.
So Suenia's original phrase was, most of them were sexists and, life.
Well, life.
Yeah. And this was changed to, most of them were sexist and came from privileged backgrounds.
Oh, okay.
So first of all, sexist should be singular.
Sex.
Because it's describing a characteristic that's shared by many.
By a group.
Yeah, by a group.
Yeah.
And then, life is a little vague.
Vague, yeah.
Right, so he offered this more precise and understandable description.
I like that came from privileged backgrounds.
Yeah, and it really paints that clearer picture.
Yeah, definitely.
And then finally in this paragraph, Suenia wrote, everything was projected to receive men.
Projected.
Yeah, which Paolo refined to everything was built for men.
Built.
So it's a much more natural and idiomatic way
Yeah.
of saying that, these facilities were designed primarily for male students.
The men.
For the men. And it's interesting to note that Paolo actually added parentheses, correct, beautiful sentence.
Oh.
After the sentence, most male students did not respect their female peers.
So he's giving positive feedback.
Yes.
At the same time.
At the same time as he's making these corrections.
That's nice.
Yeah. So it's really encouraging, to kind of see what you're doing well alongside, those areas for improvement.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's go on to that final paragraph of the second draft. In that period, the students' organization were allowed, and I participated most of it. For example, representation of student housing, academic center, central student directory, and national organizations. I studied in public university, and we have everything free, including house food studies, etc. Therefore, we had freedom to discuss, learn, and fight for our rights. This kind of situation helps us to become aware and to learn how to be able, we organized, to resist. I really believe those learnings allowed me to be what I am nowadays. Most women of my generation and another who had comes before us had collaborated with the women's rights we have today. To sum up, all of us women have to join in our local communities and our jobs, schools everywhere to fight for our rights. And if you are being disrespected, you do not can quite complain. Yeah, no woman can remain silent because abuse can take hold.
Wow. There's lots to unpack there.
Lots to unpack there. So the first correction that Paula made is in that sentence about student organizations.
All right.
So Suenia wrote the students' organization were allowed.
Organization.
Yeah, so there's a really clear singular plural agreement issue there. Organization should be organization.
Organizations.
To match that plural verb were.
Were.
And then she also wrote, I participated most of it.
Most of it.
Which is a little unclear.
Yeah.
So Paula's correction is, during that period, student organizations were allowed, and I actively participated in many of them.
Much better.
Yeah. So it's grammatically correct and it's much more specific.
Right. Many of them first back to those organizations.
Exactly.
That she listed.
Okay, next we've got her university experience. So Suenia wrote, I studied in public university, and we have everything free, including house food studies, etc.
Okay.
Paula made several changes here.
All right.
For clarity and to kind of use those articles correctly.
Yeah.
So I studied at a public university where everything was free, including housing, food, and study materials.
Okay.
So first of all, we need that preposition with university.
At the university.
Yeah, and then studyings should be the noun, study materials.
Study materials.
And then using that phrase where everything was free.
Right.
It just creates a smoother, more complex sentence structure.
Nice.
Okay, and then we have a very straightforward correction.
Yeah.
But an important one.
Alrighty.
So when you misspelled freedom as freedom.
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 Yeah, got to get those vowels in there.
Yeah, got to get those vowels in there. And then the phrase, how to be able we organize to resist, is a little bit convoluted.
Oh, it's a mouthful.
It's a mouthful.
Yeah.
So Paulo revised it to the more direct and natural, how to organize ourselves to resist.
Oh, much better.
Right? It just removes that unnecessary babel, and it just streamlines it.
Yeah, gets to the point.
Gets to the point. And then Suenia wrote about the women of her generation and another who had comes before us.
Head comes.
Yeah, so the verb form here is incorrect.
Okay.
And so Paulo corrected it to, and those who came before us.
Came.
So those, is that correct pronoun?
Right.
To refer to people in this way?
People in general.
Yeah, and came, is that simple past tense that we need here?
Came before us.
Yes. Okay, just a couple more corrections in this final paragraph. Okay.
So Whitney misspelled a little as a little. Yeah, so he corrected the spelling there.
Little.
Yes. And then finally her call to action.
Okay.
And if you're being disrespected, you do not be quiet, complaint.
Complaint.
So it has an incorrect verb form.
Yeah.
And it just kind of lacks that forcefulness.
Punch.
Of a direct command. So Paulo's corrected version is much stronger.
Okay.
And grammatically sound. And if you're being disrespected, do not stay silent. Speak up.
Speed up.
So he uses that imperative form correctly. And he adds that exclamation point for emphasis.
Love it.
So as you can see, Suenia made some really significant progress in her second draft.
She did.
And Paulo's feedback is really focused on improving her grammar,
Yeah.
her sentence structure, her word choice,
Yeah.
and that overall clarity,
All key?
which are all key
For the TOEFL.
for the TOEFL writing
Yeah.
section.
Yeah. So now, in addition to those specific kind of line-by-line edits,
Yeah.
Paulo also provided some general enhancement insights. Love it.
For Suenia to consider
Yeah.
as she continues to develop her writing.
So helpful.
So helpful.
Yeah.
And these broader points, I think, are really valuable for any student
Oh, absolutely.
who's preparing for the TOEFL or just working on their academic writing in general.
Yeah.
So one of the key strengths that Paulo highlighted is how effectively Suenia used her own personal experiences
Yeah.
to connect with this larger topic of women's rights in Brazil.
I agree.
So her personal story about her university experience in this predominantly male field
Yeah.
really makes those challenges come to life.
Vivid and relatable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it shows that she's not just relying on these abstract arguments, but she's grounding them in those real-life observations.
Absolutely.
Paulo also noted that clear structure of her essay,
Yes.
how she progressed from general statements about the complexity of the issue to those specific personal examples.
Yeah, that logical organization is so important
It is.
for a TOEFL essay.
Yeah. And he also pointed out her successful use of real-life examples to illustrate the gender issues that she's addressing,
Yeah.
which again helps to make her arguments more persuasive
Mm-hmm.
and easier for the reader to connect with.
Absolutely.
However, Paulo also reiterated some areas where Suenia needs to concentrate her efforts,
Okay.
primarily on grammar and syntax, including sentence structure, verb tenses, and prepositions.
Those are big ones.
Yeah, those are big ones.
Yeah.
On word choice and expression, aiming for that more natural and precise phrasing.
Right.
And then finally, on those important details of spelling and punctuation,
Oh, yeah.
which can really impact that overall impression of your writing.
For sure.
And then based on these identified areas for growth,
Okay.
Paulo offered some very practical advice.
All right. I love practical advice.
Me too.
Give it to me.
So he specifically recommended grammar exercises that focus on prepositions and verb tenses,
Okay.
as those were some recurring areas that needed attention in her draft.
Good idea.
He also suggested engaging in reading comprehension activities that focus on the topic of gender equality.
Oh, interesting.
So this will not only help her build her vocabulary related to this subject, but it'll also expose her to more examples of strong academic writing.
On similar themes.
On similar themes, yeah.
Yeah, I like
So
that.
it's kind of a double whammy.
It is.
And then finally, Paulo recommended that Suenia practice essay structuring,
Okay.
paying particular attention to how she transitions between ideas and paragraphs.
Transitions.
Transitions, yeah, those smooth and logical transitions are so important.
Essential
Yeah.
for a cohesive, well-argued essay.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Okay, so now going beyond the specific corrections and these broader insights,
Mm-hmm.
Paulo also sent Suenia a really encouraging personal message.
Oh, I like that.
So he mentioned how much he enjoyed reading her essay,
Oh.
and he specifically chose the topic of women's place in society because he knows that it's a subject she feels passionately about.
That's so nice.
So that personal connection from the teacher, I think, is just invaluable.
It is.
And he acknowledged that her personal experiences made this discussion on women's rights in Brazil particularly powerful and engaging.
Powerful.
And he even shared that her writing prompted him to reconsider some of his own perspectives,
Wow.
leading to a deconstruction process in his own thinking.
That's amazing.
It's really significant.
It is.
And he also explicitly stated that her passion for women empowerment comes through clearly in her writing,
Wonderful.
which is such a wonderful compliment.
It is.
And it really speaks to her genuine engagement with the topic.
Absolutely.
He did gently remind her of the need to continue refining her grammar,
Okay.
specifically mentioning those verb tenses and prepositions again.
Right.
But he very supportively offered his ongoing help.
Oh.
And he suggested that they use their class time to revisit those specific grammar points
Right.
and to review those relevant learning materials.
He's a great teacher.
He sounds like a great teacher. And he concluded with a really motivating message. Keep writing, keep expressing yourself, and never stop fighting for what you believe in.
I love that.
He also reinforced his role as a support not just for her English language development, but also for the social causes that she cares about,
That's so important.
and offering his assistance, whenever she might need it.
Wow, Suenia, you're lucky.
She is.
Yes.
So as we kind of wrap up our deep dive
Okay.
into Suenia's writing, what are the key takeaways for her and really for anyone who's preparing for the TOEFL writing section or looking to improve their English writing skills in general?
Okay. So I would say, first of all, that clear logical structure in your essays.
Yes.
As Paulo noted, Suenia had a good foundation there.
Yeah?
Moving from general to specific.
Absolutely.
Secondly, strong command of grammar is essential.
Yes.
Paying attention to those verb tenses, prepositions,
Yes.
subject-verb agreement.
Those details are important.
They are.
Yeah, they impact your score.
And they impact how clearly you communicate your ideas.
Absolutely. And then there's the power of choosing your words carefully, expressing your ideas in a natural and precise way.
Sometimes simple is better.
Yes, sometimes simple is better.
Yeah.
As Paulo emphasized, don't underestimate the impact of connecting your own personal experiences to the topic, as long as it's relevant.
Relevant.
It can make your writing so much more
Let's jump.
engaging
Engaging and persuasive.
and persuasive.
Yeah.
And then finally, the importance of seeking out and actively applying feedback.
So important.
So important. Suenia's progress between her first and second draft really shows just how much you can improve
Yeah.
by taking that constructive criticism
Yeah.
and using it to refine your work.
Absolutely.
So as you prepare for your TOEFL exam in the coming week,
Good luck.
yeah, good luck.
Yeah.
And as you work on your next writing sample, really focus on those key areas that Paulo highlighted.
Yeah.
Think about how even concentrating on mastering, those tricky prepositions or ensuring that you've got that consistency in your verb tenses can make a huge difference in your TOEFL score.
And your confidence.
And your confidence.
As a writer.
Yeah, we're rooting for you.
Yes. Go, Suenia.
You got this.
You got this.
All right, that's it for today's deep dive.
Thanks for listening.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.